throwaway account because some people from my old life still lurk here. I'm posting this in the spirit of those after-service humiliation threads I used to read late at night, thinking, wow, that's awful. Glad that'll never be me. Spoiler, it was me. For context, I'm a woman in my late 20s. I served. I came back from Gaza a few months ago. I won't get into operational details. This isn't about that. But I will say this. I didn't come back broken. Tired? Yes. Changed, obviously. But not weak. Before I left, I had what I thought was a stable life. Not perfect, but solid. A family house that was ours. A father who liked to say he was proud of me to other people. A relationship that was already cracking. But I told myself distance would either fix it or end it cleanly. You know, adult logic. The first sign of trouble came even before deployment. Small things. Calls unanswered. My father suddenly busy whenever legal or financial topics came up. My partner joking, half joking, that the army would straighten me out. Comments about how I'd come back different said with a smirk, not concern. Still, I left thinking, whatever happens, I have a home to return to. That belief kept me steady when things got bad over there. Fast forward. I land back home. No parade, no hugs. Fine. I didn't expect any. I take a taxi to my street, exhausted, but weirdly excited. I remember gripping my bag and thinking, shower, bed, silence. The taxi slows down, then stops. The driver looks at the address, then at me, then back at the street. Miss, he says carefully, are you sure this is it? I look up. Where my house had been, where my room, my childhood walls, my front door were, there was nothing. No rubble, no construction, just emptiness. A flat, cleaned-out lot like someone had erased my life with a ruler. I laughed, like an idiot. Actual laughter. I thought it was a mistake, or a prank, or that exhaustion had finally fried my brain. I called my father. No answer. That was the moment something cold settled in my chest. Not fear yet, not anger, recognition. Something had been done to me, and whoever did it assumed I'd come back too tired, too grateful, too softened by service to fight. They were wrong. But I didn't know yet how wrong they were. That realization came later, inside a courtroom, when I walked in and everyone stood up, and the judge stared at my file and said, "This can't be, it's..." And I saw my father's face go pale. But that's for the next part. After that empty lot, my brain did this weird survival thing where it refused to panic. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I paid the taxi, stood there for a full minute like a glitching NPC, and then did the most unromantic thing possible. I started asking questions. Neighbors first. That was humiliation number one, by the way. Standing in uniform, dusty bag at my feet, knocking on doors like, "Hi, sorry to bother you. Do you know where my house went?" The looks I got still make my stomach turn. Not shock, not sympathy. Awkwardness. The kind people have when they know something you don't, and they're hoping you'll go away so they don't have to say it out loud. One neighbor finally cracked. An older woman who used to bring us pastries on holidays. She wouldn't look me in the eye. "Oh," she said slowly. You weren't told?" "Told what?" That's when the pieces started falling, and let me tell you, realizing you were humiliated before you even left hits differently. Apparently, a few weeks after my deployment orders came through, things changed. My father stopped calling the house ours. He started calling it his. Then he started telling people I wasn't really coming back, that I'd signed away rights, that the army takes care of them after them, like I was already gone. Then came the paperwork. Quiet, efficient. Signed while I was training, unreachable, sleeping 4 hours a night. A power of attorney I'd trusted him with. Because why wouldn't I? He was my father. Because I was focused on not getting people killed. He sold the house, not to move, not to downsize, to erase me. And here's the part that makes my hands shake even now. People laughed about it. Not openly, but enough. Jokes about how I'd come back tough, but homeless. About how service teaches humility. About how a girl like me would learn her place. I wasn't there to hear it, which, in their minds, made it safe. I finally reached my ex that night. He knew. Of course he did. His reaction? Well, you're strong, right? You'll figure it out. No anger, no shock. Just relief it wasn't his problem. That's when it hit me. This wasn't chaos. This was a coordinated assumption. That service had stripped me of my right to fight back. That I'd come home grateful for scraps, too disciplined to cause trouble, too traumatized to push. I slept on a friend's couch that night, staring at the ceiling, replaying every dismissive comment from before I left. Every joke, every "don't worry about it." This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was an attempt at humiliation. And the worst part? They thought it had already worked. Next part is where I stop asking questions and start answering them. I didn't confront my father right away. That surprises people when I tell them. They expect some cinematic explosion, me storming into his place, screaming, breaking down. But service teaches you something useful. You don't rush into hostile territory without intel. So I waited 2 days. 2 days of silence from him. 2 days where he knew I was back. 2 days where he let me sleep on a couch like a displaced stranger while he rehearsed whatever version of reality he planned to sell me. On the 3rd day, I showed up unannounced. New apartment building. Gated. Clean. The kind of place paid for with my erased square meters. He opened the door, saw me, and froze. Not anger, not guilt. Fear. That was new. "Why didn't you call?" he said, immediately defensive. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't step inside. I just looked past him, taking inventory like I was back on duty. New furniture, new TV, no trace of me, no photos, no boxes tucked away. Just in case. "You sold the house," I said. Flat. Not a question. He sighed like I'd accused him of forgetting milk. "You weren't using it," he said. "And let's be honest, you might not have come back the same. These things happen after places like that." There it was. The belittlement dressed up as concern. He kept going, warming up now, talking about practical decisions, about how I was too intense, how I scared people when I came back in uniform, how I should be grateful he handled things while I was gone. At one point, he actually said, "You should thank me. This humbles people." I remember nodding slowly, calmly, the way you do when someone is confessing without realizing it. "Did you use the power of attorney?" I asked. He smirked. Actual smirk. That's what it's for. That's when he crossed the line from arrogant to stupid, because he assumed my silence meant ignorance. I pulled out my phone, not dramatically, just enough, and said, "Good. Then you won't mind explaining it to a judge." The color drained from his face in real time. I told him I'd already spoken to a lawyer. That selling shared property under false assumptions about incapacity doesn't look great. That jokes about not coming back the same sound different when written down. He laughed, nervous, dismissive. "You won't do that. After everything you've been through, you don't want more stress." That was the moment I realized how deeply he misunderstood me. I leaned in slightly, not threatening, just close enough that he had to listen. "I didn't survive Gaza to be humiliated by paperwork," I said. "No shouting, no tears, just facts." I left before he could respond. Let him sit with it. Let him imagine courtrooms, records, questions he couldn't joke his way out of. Behind me, the door clicked shut, and for the first time since I'd come back, I felt something solid under my feet. Not revenge yet. Momentum. I thought the confrontation would break me open, that I'd finally cry in some dramatic, overdue way. Instead, it did something stranger. It compressed everything. The anger didn't explode. It settled. That's the part people don't talk about enough. Everyone understands rage. They don't understand what comes after, when rage realizes it has nowhere to go screaming and decides to become precise. The night after I saw my father, I sat alone in my friend's kitchen at 2 a.m., lights off, phone in my hand. Messages kept coming in. Mutual acquaintances suddenly checking in. People who hadn't spoken to me in years asking how I was adjusting back to normal life. Normal. Like my life had been paused and resumed, minus a house. I didn't answer. Instead, my body started reacting in delayed waves. My hands shook when I poured water. My jaw hurt from clenching. I caught myself scanning exits in a room where nothing was happening. Not because of Gaza, but because betrayal hits the same nervous system buttons as danger. What messed with me the most wasn't the loss of the house. It was the intention. They hadn't just taken something. They'd tried to shrink me, to reduce me to a stereotype. The soldier who comes back damaged, grateful, quiet, easy to override. The daughter who should accept decisions made for her own good. The woman who shouldn't make things uncomfortable. I realized something ugly and clarifying that night. If I'd come back crying, unstable, asking for help, they would have felt justified. My calm terrified them. I replayed my father's words in my head over and over. This humbles people. The casual cruelty of it. Like humiliation was a teaching tool, like erasing me was a favor. For a moment, just a moment. I wondered if fighting back would cost me too much. More stress, more exposure, more explaining myself to people who had already decided who I was. That thought passed. Acceptance doesn't always mean letting go. Sometimes it means accepting that a line has been crossed and you are no longer obligated to be gentle. I emailed the lawyer again. Short message, clear. Proceed. Then I did something almost mundane. I went for a run. Long, brutal, lungs-burning run. The kind that strips thoughts down to muscle and breath. Somewhere around kilometer 5, the shock finally cracked, and grief came rushing in. Not sobbing, not collapsing, just tears streaming while my feet kept hitting pavement. I wasn't mourning a building. I was mourning the idea that service would earn me respect at home. By the time I stopped, sweating and shaking, something else had taken its place. Resolve. They thought humiliation would end me. They didn't understand that endurance is my native language. And next, I was going to make this official. Here's the thing nobody prepares you for. Once lawyers get involved, everything speeds up and slows down at the same time. Days passed where nothing seemed to happen. And then suddenly, everything did. My lawyer called on a Tuesday morning. Calm voice, precise words. The kind that makes you sit down even if you're already seated. Turns out, my father hadn't just been careless. He'd been confident. Confident enough to leave a trail. Emails, messages, casual explanations to third parties about how I was away, unstable, not really in a position to decide. He'd leaned hard on the narrative that service equals diminished capacity. He'd said it so often he stopped treating it like an opinion and started treating it like fact. That's where the humiliation really showed itself. Not loud, not public. Administrative, quiet. The kind that assumes you'll never look closely enough to notice. The filing went in faster than I expected. Emergency injunction, property dispute, abuse of power of attorney. My name typed out in full, followed by titles I hadn't thought about in months. Veteran, active, reserve, mentally competent. Seeing those words on official documents hit me harder than I expected. Not because I needed validation, but because someone had tried to erase them. Then came the messages. My father called, left a voicemail. Voice shaking, suddenly warm. "We can talk this through." An aunt texted, "Do you really want to do this to family?" A family friend suggested mediation before things get ugly. Funny how humiliation is acceptable until resistance appears. I didn't respond to any of it. The court date was set faster than anyone expected. Apparently, judges don't love when military service is used as a convenient excuse to strip someone of rights. Who knew? Walking into that building the first time, I felt something familiar. The weight of eyes. Not hostile, curious, assessing. People glanced at me, then at the file in their hands, then back at me. I wasn't what they expected. I wasn't crying. I wasn't withdrawn. I wasn't disheveled or fragile or broken in the way people like to imagine returning soldiers. I stood straight, quiet, alert. My father arrived late, rushed, avoided looking at me. When he finally did, his expression wasn't anger. It was calculation. Like he was still trying to figure out which version of me this was, and whether he could still control it. That's when I understood something deeply satisfying and deeply sad at the same time. He had built his entire plan around the idea that I wouldn't show up like this. And the worst part for him? This was me being restrained. Next part is where the room changes, the moment my name is read aloud, and the story stops being theoretical. Courtrooms have a smell: old paper, disinfectant, quiet authority, the kind of place where people expect emotions to be muted and truth to arrive neatly labeled. That morning, I sat still, hands folded, breathing steady. I'd worn civilian clothes, nothing sharp, nothing soft, neutral, unremarkable. The kind of outfit that lets people project whatever story they want onto you. My father sat 2 rows back with his lawyer, whispering too much. Every few seconds he glanced at me, then away, like looking directly might confirm something he didn't want to be true. When the clerk called the case, it was just another name on the list. My name. Ordinary. Familiar. I stood. Chairs scraped, not loudly, just enough. The judge looked down at the file, then up at me, then back down again. He paused. A beat too long. His brows pulled together, confused. "This can't be," he said slowly, then stopped himself. "It's..." Silence. He cleared his throat and adjusted his glasses. "You're the service member?" "Yes, Your Honor." Not raised, not defensive, just factual. The judge leaned back, scanning the documents again. The words on the page clearly weren't matching the person in front of him. He looked past me, toward my father. "You claimed diminished capacity," the judge said, "that the petitioner was unable to manage her affairs due to deployment-related impairment." My father's lawyer jumped in, too quickly. Something about stress, about concern, about protection. The judge raised a hand. "I'm speaking to your client." My father opened his mouth, closed it, swallowed. The judge looked at me again. "You understand why we're here today?" "Yes." "You understand the nature of these proceedings?" "Yes." "Do you feel coerced or confused about your property rights?" "No." Each answer landed like a measured strike, not dramatic, just devastating in its clarity. The judge nodded slowly, then turned to the file again. "It says here you returned to find your primary residence sold." "Yes." "And no alternative housing was provided?" "No." A murmur rippled through the room. Subtle, but it was there. That moment when spectators stop being neutral and start paying attention. The judge sighed. Not irritated, disappointed. He looked directly at my father. "Do you know what happens when you misuse a power of attorney under false pretenses?" My father's face had gone gray. Not pale, gray. Like all the blood had evacuated to somewhere safer. I was acting in her best interest," he said, voice cracking. The judge didn't raise his voice. That made it worse. "Sir," he said, "you erased your daughter's home while she was serving. Then you told people she wasn't fit to object." He paused. "That's not protection. That's exploitation." I didn't look at my father. I didn't need to. I could feel it. The moment he realized the room had turned on him, that his story had collapsed, that whatever humiliation he'd planned for me was now boomeranging back, sharper and public. The judge scheduled further action, froze assets, and ordered documentation I knew my father didn't want to produce. As we stood to leave, people looked at me differently, not with pity, with something closer to respect and unease, because they'd expected a victim, and instead, they'd gotten a witness who wouldn't blink. Outside the courtroom, my father tried to speak to me. I didn't stop. Next part is about what happens when the fear finally hits him, and how quickly the people who laughed start rewriting history. Something interesting happens when power shifts. People pretend it didn't. Outside the courtroom, the air felt different. Lighter, somehow. Like a storm had broken somewhere behind us. I stood on the steps for a second, just breathing, when I heard my name. Too familiar, too urgent. It was my father, not the authoritative voice I grew up with, not the man who signed papers over my life while I was gone. This voice was thin, scraping. "Wait," he said. "Please, we need to talk." People were around, lawyers, clerks, strangers smoking or checking their phones, witnesses. That mattered now. I turned, not because I owed him anything, but because I wanted him to see my face when I answered. "There's nothing to talk about," I said. He stepped closer anyway. Bad move. His hands shook, and he tried to disguise it by shoving them into his pockets. "I didn't know it would go like this," he said quickly. "They made it sound like a formality. You know how people talk about soldiers, about stress." I cut him off, calmly. "You talked about me that way." That landed harder than yelling ever could. He flinched. Actually flinched. Like he'd expected anger and got something worse. Accuracy. Behind him, I noticed movement. People from the neighborhood. A distant cousin. Someone who'd once joked about me learning humility. They weren't laughing now. They weren't even pretending not to stare. That's when it clicked for them. This wasn't a broken veteran quietly disappearing. This was a legal record, a courtroom transcript, a judge who'd frozen assets and used the word exploitation out loud. The whispers started almost immediately. "I didn't know it was like that. He said she wasn't stable. Why would he do that to his own daughter?" Funny how fast the narrative changes when there are consequences. My father lowered his voice. "You don't understand what this is going to do to me." I almost smiled. "I understand exactly," I said. "You just didn't think I would." He reached out, didn't touch me, but close enough. A gesture that used to mean authority. Now it just looked desperate. "People will think I'm a monster," he said. I looked him in the eye for the first time that day. "They already do," I said. "They just hadn't said it out loud yet." That was the moment his fear stopped being abstract. You could see it in his posture, in the way his shoulders folded inward. He wasn't scared of me. He was scared of exposure, of documentation, of being seen clearly. And me? I felt something unexpected. Not triumph, not joy, relief. Because humiliation only works when you're isolated, when the story about you goes unchallenged. Now the story was public, and it wasn't mine anymore to defend. It was his to survive. Next part is about the backlash, the messages, and how suddenly everyone wanted to support me once it became dangerous not to. If you've ever wondered how fast people can change sides, try filing a lawsuit that exposes them by association. My phone started buzzing before I even got home. Messages from people who hadn't checked on me once while I was deployed. Former neighbors, distant relatives, even one guy who used to make jokes about me being too intense before service. "So proud of you. If you need anything, I'm here. I always knew you were strong. Always. Sure." What they really meant was, please don't lump me in with him. Because suddenly, being connected to my father wasn't safe anymore. The story had shifted from concerned parent managing a difficult daughter to man who exploited his child's service to erase her. And no one wanted their name anywhere near that. The most surreal message came from my ex. "I didn't realize it was that bad. He wrote, "If you want to talk, I'm around." That one actually made me laugh. Out loud. Alone in a borrowed room, laughing like someone who'd just dodged something heavy. Talk about what? How convenient silence feels when you're not the one being humiliated? I didn't reply. What hit harder were the apologies disguised as confusion. "I thought you agreed to it. He said you didn't want the house. We assumed you'd start fresh after service." Assumed. That word does so much damage and never gets held accountable. At night, though, when the noise died down, that's when it crept in. The delayed emotional impact. The questions no one else asks you. What if I hadn't had the energy to fight? What if I'd believed them? What if I'd come back softer? That's the part of humiliation people don't see. Not the act itself, but the gamble behind it. They bet on you being too exhausted to resist. I started sleeping lightly again. Not nightmares. Worse. Hyper-awareness. Every sound registered. Every shift of light pulled me half awake. Not fear of violence. Fear of being overridden again. So I did something intentional. I stopped explaining myself. No long posts. No emotional clarifications. No public statements beyond what was legally necessary. Let the documents speak. Let the court dates exist. Let silence do what it does best. Make people sit with their assumptions. The strongest moment wasn't public at all. It was when I realized I no longer felt ashamed walking into spaces where people knew. When their discomfort outweighed mine. Humiliation flips when you refuse to carry it alone. And by then, I wasn't carrying it at all. Next part is about the choice I had to make. Revenge, rebuilding, or something quieter and far more permanent. People kept asking me what I was going to do next, and they all asked it the same way. Eyes bright, voices low, like they were waiting for fireworks. They wanted revenge. They wanted me to go nuclear. Public statements, media, naming and shaming. They wanted a spectacle big enough to punish not just my father, but everyone who had laughed, assumed, stayed quiet. And for a while, I understood the temptation. I imagined it late at night, lying awake, exposing every message, every quote, every smug little comment about how service breaks people. Watching faces collapse in real time, making them feel small the way they'd tried to make me feel disposable. But here's the thing service taught me, and humiliation accidentally reinforced. Revenge keeps you tied to the people who hurt you. I didn't want to orbit my father's shadow for the rest of my life. I didn't want my identity to calcify around what was taken from me. So I chose something colder, something steadier. I chose irreversibility. I worked with my lawyer quietly, methodically, no leaks, no drama, just consequences that stacked up one after another. Asset freezes, reversals, court orders that don't care about intention, only outcome. The house? Legally contested. The money? Accounted for. The narrative of my incapacity? Officially dismantled line by line. My father tried once more to regain control. One last attempt. He showed up where he wasn't invited, voice lowered, eyes darting. "You've made your point," he said. "Let's stop before this gets worse." I looked at him and felt nothing. No anger, no triumph. "This is me stopping," I said. That was the moment he finally understood. This wasn't revenge. This was me removing his access to my life entirely. At the same time, I started rebuilding, but not the way people expected. I didn't rush into a new place to prove something. I didn't post inspirational captions about resilience. I took my time, found work that fit who I am now, not who people thought I'd be after service. Built routines that belong to me. Strength isn't always loud. Sometimes it's the ability to walk away without leaving a mess behind you. The humiliation they planned required my participation. They never got it. Next part is where the case concludes, and where the shock fully lands for the people who thought this would all quietly disappear. The final hearing didn't feel dramatic when I woke up that morning. No nerves, no rehearsed speeches in the mirror, just a quiet certainty, like checking off the last item on a list you've been carrying too long. That's how I knew I'd already won, regardless of the outcome. The courtroom was fuller this time, not because my case was special, but because word had spread. People like to watch consequences unfold, especially when they once assumed there wouldn't be any. My father looked smaller. Same suit, same posture, but the confidence was gone. He barely spoke to his lawyer. He didn't look at me at all. The judge did not rush. He went through the facts slowly, methodically, like someone dismantling a lie not out of anger, but out of respect for the process. Misuse of power of attorney, false claims of incapacity, sale of shared property without informed consent, intentional misrepresentation of a service member's status. Each point landed with a dull, heavy finality. When the ruling came, it wasn't explosive. It didn't need to be. The sale was voided. Funds were ordered returned. Additional penalties imposed. My father was formally warned about further legal consequences if he attempted contact outside of designated channels. But the moment that changed everything, the moment I'll remember forever, was when the judge looked directly at him and said, "This court recognizes the petitioner as fully competent, credible, and wronged. Her service does not diminish her rights. It strengthens the obligation to protect them." I didn't react. I didn't smile. I didn't nod. I just breathed. Behind me, I felt it. The shift. The quiet horror of people realizing they had watched a humiliation attempt turn inside out. That this wasn't a private family disagreement anymore. It was a precedent. My father stood when it was over, unsteady. For a second, it looked like he might say something. Apologize. Explain. He didn't. He walked out without a word. And that silence, that was the loudest thing he'd ever given me. Outside, the world kept moving. Cars passed. People laughed on the steps. Life, indifferent and unstoppable. I stood there for a moment longer than necessary, letting it sink in. They had tried to erase me while I was serving. Instead, they documented themselves. One more part to go. What I learned, and what I'd tell anyone reading this who thinks humiliation only works on the weak. I didn't post this right away because I needed to make sure I wasn't writing from adrenaline or spite. This is me, weeks later, calmer, steadier, sitting in a space that's finally mine, physically and mentally. Here's what I learned. Humiliation doesn't start with cruelty. It starts with assumptions. That you'll be quiet, that you'll be tired, that you'll be grateful for whatever scraps you're left with. That service softened you, broke you, emptied you out. That's the lie everything else is built on. What they don't understand is that service teaches you something most people never learn: how to function under pressure without falling apart, how to observe instead of react, how to wait for the right moment instead of wasting energy proving something to people who don't deserve access to you. The attempt to humiliate me didn't fail because I was loud. It failed because I stayed clear. Clear about what happened. Clear about what was taken. Clear about who was responsible. And here's the part I want anyone in a similar position to hear, especially if you've come back from service and feel that subtle disrespect creeping in. You don't owe anyone fragility. You don't owe them tears to make your pain believable. You don't owe explanations to people who benefited from misunderstanding you. And you absolutely don't owe loyalty to someone who used your absence as an opportunity. If someone tries to erase you while you're gone, let them finish the paperwork. Because documents don't lie when fear does. As for my father, I don't hate him. Hate would keep him relevant. He made a choice based on who he thought I'd be when I came back. He was wrong. And that's enough. If you're reading this and wondering whether it's worth standing up for yourself when humiliation feels quieter than violence, yes, it is. Every time. Because the moment they realize you're not ashamed, that's the moment they become afraid. And fear, unlike humiliation, finally belongs to the right person.